usually phytosanitary certificates or plant health certificates, regulations, all that should safeguard trade with plant or plant-based products from having any pest or pathogen carrying with them. A lot of legislation, a lot of time, a lot of resources have gone into these legislations or certificates. And a lot of people really trust those certificates for good reasons. We have some challenges, though, when it comes to really making sure that these certificates mirror what is on those plants. In Norway, we had a project about a year ago and a couple of years ago where we found about 44% of all the incoming plant consignments had some Phytophthora on them. Almost 90 had plant parasitic nematodes on them. All of them had a valid plant health certificate or a phytosanitary certificate. So obviously something is not quite working with the implementation of these rules and regulations. One reason is that it's extremely difficult to go and to check each and every consignment, the different sendings of plants for plants, plant pathogens, and pests. It is just practically impossible to look at each and every plant. The other thing is that a lot of the pathogens can be latent. So you might try to visually assess a plant that shows no symptoms of the pathogen it contains. So that makes it very difficult to rely on visual assessments. And it might not be really a surprise that about only 3 to 10% of all the consignments are actually tested because it is so time and competence demanding. Who has time, who has money for that? So one possible solution is that to go away from the visual inspections one-to-one directly, aided by the molecular tools, to high throughput remote sensing of the plant health status. And that is where the project PurPest, financed by the Horizon Europe initiative, is coming in. Plants cannot talk, right? Like we can. There's no acoustic signals that we usually have, but they can still communicate the plant health status by emitting chemicals. Every plant, if you just go around, if you go through a forest, you can smell, you know that you're in a forest. You can have these chemical compounds, these volatiles, and your nose is not too bad a sensor that can detect them. It is a lot more challenging to detect pathogens coming. So if you have a whole cloud of different spores coming around and it will land on your plant, the plant will respond immediately. It will start emitting volatile organic compounds, chemicals that need to be then detected. See, it can be very, very specific for the different pathogens that are out there. Some of these chemicals can be just increased, they can be consecutive all the time there, but increased upon arrival of a pest or a pathogen. Some of them are really, really specific. In any case, we would need definitely a sensor to detect these volatile organic compounds, these informative signals, to make sure that you that you can interpret the language of the plant. Now, to do this, to actually identify that informative chemical is not easy. There's a multitude of different chemical compounds out there. We are surrounded by them. You know, you smell something all the time. We might not be aware of it. Some of these compounds are really, really low in their concentration. So it's very difficult to detect them. Some of them might be just not stable, so it might be there and then it disappears again. Some of them are emitted by just the plant that is attacked, some of them by the pest, some of them are emitted when they're both from the pest and from the plant. Some of them are general, some of them are very specific. So we are doing very specific controlled plant experiments where we collect these chemical organic or these volatile organic compounds from those plants that are healthy and those plants that are attacked by a specific pest or pathogen. It is really a puzzle. And if you just think about the Egyptian hieroglyphics, just a couple of degrees more complex. That's what we're talking about when we try to understand the language of plants. But the community of chemical ecologists and scientists who are working with that is growing. And we will put the compounds that we are finding and that we can associate it with a particular pest or pathogen on the Zenodo platform to make sure it's open and other people can utilize it as well. Now, once we have our target compound, and we can associate it with the pest that we're interested in, we need sensors. And this might look very complicated, but it really is not. We are surrounded by a lot of volatile organic compounds. The first thing, if you want to capture your target compound, is you need to concentrate it. You need to somehow capture all those chemicals, all those volatile organic compounds on a pre-concentrator. Once you have done that, you want to separate them out so that you really know at what time is that compound coming out. And then you capture it on a very highly, now I don't really know if that works. Oh, no, it doesn't. You have to capture that on a highly selective coating. So it works basically like a lock in a key. Only your target compound that you have identified will be captured on a surface. Once you have that, you can use either solidly mounted resonators, like on the top there, where the capturing of this particular compound will produce a shift in your frequency. And that shift can then be detected by your sensor. The other thing is you're using light in the visual range, a Raman spectrum. And if you have your target compound present, then that Raman spectrum will shift and you will detect that shift. So it's really highly specific. Sometimes you're not quite sure what you're looking for, or you have just more range. Then you do the same thing. You capture your compounds, you select, you separate them out, and then you put them through a phytoionization detector, which basically throws UV light at your compounds, at all the different volatiles that are coming once in a row, and then it creates a current. If it's present, the current will be there, and you can amplify it and detect it. It is not as selective, but it's highly sensitive, so you can detect even very, very low concentrations. So that's the technology that will help us to detect these volatile organic compounds and decode the language of the plants. Currently, what we are having is, this is our first sensor system prototype that we are using. You have in the dark, basically up in the top, you have the pre-concentrator to make sure that you actually capture the volatile organic compounds. In the black box in the bottom there on the right-hand side, you have your chromatogram that will separate your compounds, and then you have your photoionization detector in the middle there. The idea is to have basically a box that you can put in your backpack, about 4 kilograms heavy. You have batteries, it runs for at least 8 hours, and you have, as you can see on the very left side there, you have a staff that will suck in the air. So you take your staff, you put it out in your consignment, you suck in the air, it will be analyzed, and within 10 to 30 minutes, you should know if the target compound that is associated with your pest or disease is there or not. You will have a LED platform, basically an iPad sort of thing, that will tell you which compounds are present and which are not. So here we have our first prototype. We want to add some more of the sensors to it, but this is how it looks right now. Now, having that is not enough, right? It's nice to have something great, but how do you really implement it? So the social scientists started to have a questionnaire, and they asked the nursery owners, would you actually like something like that? Do you think it would really facilitate your daily operations? And the biggest concern of the nurseries, and that's maybe no surprise, is it profitable? How much will it cost? Will we actually have any benefit from using this? The other thing is it, not just the economic return, but is it also reliable? Is it accurate? Will it work into our normal processing and our workflows? Those are the questions they were asking. Of course, will it not be just sufficient just to look and rely on your phytosanitary certificates? Can we just close our eyes and let it go? Will it not be better like that? And if we have a sensor like that, will it work only for the 5 target pests that we've been working in this particular project, or will it be versatile for many other pathogens and pests as well? Addressing these concerns, of course, is absolute essential for implementation. And the first step to do that is, we tell them that the concept is really not that new. Using volatile organic compounds to detect undesirables is actually already used for decades. It's just that the sensors are not so electric. They are canine. Dogs have been detecting narcotics, explosives, plants for decades. Recently, in the Bexil project that we've been just hearing about, they actually use dogs to detect Xylella fastidiosa, the quarantine bacteria in olive grooves. Believe that. Dogs can sniff this out. In Australia, they're using dogs now to determine where are the Phytophthora dieback trees. So it's not just a pie in the sky. It is actually working and people are using it. Using dogs is great, but in very cramped spaces and in certain areas, it is a bit difficult to use a dog. So we have seen more and more electronic noses also aiding the dogs in their ability to detect, for example, explosives. The food industry has started to put an eye on this because they can determine the right picking time just by using volatile organic compounds. When is the fruit actually ripe? When do you have to pick it? Or how can you avoid having spoilage organisms like that gray mold and grapes, making sure that the customer is not going to return this? You have to make sure that it's clean and healthy. But all that, we can talk about it all day long, and we can really try to make adequate pricing. We can show the functionality, initiate campaigns, have really action together with the research. But for true implementation, we really need to convince the users that this will facilitate their daily work. Not to make it more difficult, not to have another bureaucratic layer, but to really make it easier for them. There has to be some benefit, preferably a profit, but that is sort of the paradigm shift, that detecting pests and pathogens in your consignment should not be a shame, should not be something you want to close your eyes to. It should be an eye-opener. It should be something, yes, I found this and I stopped it. And that should be something that is rewarded. Only then, when we go to the level of each entity, can we really implement our technology. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Andrea. So then we open the floor for questions and the comments. And for those on Zoom, you can use the Q&A function. So actually, I have a question for Andrea on those sensors. Do you have to make new ones for each pest? And why not just use dogs?
That's a very good question, Knut. As I said, the dogs can be sometimes distracted. Even in the olive grooves, you might have a rabbit running around, so dogs are not completely fail-proof in that regard, even though they have the best nose ever. So when it comes to these, how versatile our, this sensor will be, it is a question of like, how specific do you want to be? Do you want to have only 5 or 10 or 100 pests and diseases? Or do you want to just generally say, if we have some insects on there, and if it's eating our leaves and plants, we don't want it. So we can make a sensor that is either very general or very specific. And that really depends on what the users will want. And we have heard about the high, making it risk-based, just looking for those places and for those pests that are really high risk. That's a possibility. It could also be a possibility just to really increase the standards and say, we don't want any pests and pathogens. But that's, up to you.